All right. Did that sound familiar, Dan?
It sure did.
Well, thanks
We
for
were singing that
joining
quite a
me.
bit last night.
I bet you
Yeah.
were. I wasn't able to watch it because I worked late, and by the time I got through and filed the article that I was needing to get filed on the Titans, the game was already mostly over. I did watch it on Twitter. Watching sports on Twitter is always so much fun. But I know that
Yeah.
you were there and you've attended a first of all, let you introduce yourself. It's your first time on the show. I'm very happy to have you. We tried to Skype again. Skype's got some issues, so we weren't able to do that. And I woke up with a stomach, but Joe must go on, and so we're doing this. And I'm so happy to have you. Tell everybody out there who you are and about yourself.
Hi, my name is Dan Head, and I am a 1995 graduate of West Point. I was a recruited swimmer. I swam all 4 years, and I'm an engineer now in New York. I write a lot of different things, and I started writing about the Army football team in 2013. My wife finally talked me into going to some games and taking her and the kids, and I just
that's a good woman. That's a keeper
team.
right there.
Yeah. She was really fired up. And I hadn't been back since I graduated. She finally just put her foot down and said, "Hey, this is ridiculous. You got to take us." So this is my second season as a season ticket holder. And like I said, I started writing about the team, and for whatever reason, people have started reading what I write, and here we are.
Oh, that's awesome. So is she a football fan?
I think she's more a fan of the West Point experience, if I'm being honest.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Yeah. We talk about the military on here, and I've got family members who are military members and who have served this country, and I've dated a couple of guys a Marine and an officer in the Marine Corps, and and I suppose he's an officer. He is an officer in the National Guard, and so I've got some fit in it. I've read an interesting off topic, but I want to ask you this interesting article, and I want to get your thoughts on it just briefly. And it was saying I often do this, and I wonder how you feel about it. It said that it was a bit of a sort of a double-edged sword when people thanked military people for their service. Does that bother you?
It doesn't bother me, but personally, I spent 5 years in the Army. I went to the 3rd Infantry Division. I went to the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea, spent the balance of my time in schools. The most dangerous thing I saw in my time in the service was potential alcohol poisoning along the DMZ from late nights out partying. And, I did my part, and I feel like whatever I wanted to accomplish in the Army, I did. But I got a good deal for my service, and I think a lot of people, service has a lot to offer. So when people thank me, I always feel like I should be thanking you. You put me through college. I had an amazing experience. To me, service is its own reward, and I'm not a fan of military as special interest. Guys serve for whatever reason. It's an all-volunteer Army. I get that it's been a tough few years, and that some guys have gone through difficult things, but for the average service member, it's a job. They signed up, and if they didn't get what they needed to get out of it, that's on them. You sign a contract, both parties have to uphold their end. The end. That's it. So
not everybody does serve in combat zones, and I do a weekly series with a good friend of mine. His name is Matt Wood. He is a computer guy. He's, I guess, sort of like a computer engineer, and he was in the service. He was in the Air Force, and had a similar experience to you. It helped pay for his education and that, but he never really served in a combat zone. Now there are service, and the Marine that I dated, now he served in combat zone. He served 5 tours in Iraq and was injured in his last tour. Turned out fatally injured in his last tour, and
I'm so sorry to hear that.
It was it was very difficult for reasons to deal with that situation. And we won't get into any of that, but but there are those who don't have that, and for him, that he liked surfing in combat areas, and that was something that he enjoyed. But not everybody does that, and it's an interesting conversation. I don't want to get off because I want to talk about Temple. It sounds like it was such an exciting game, and wow, that was a big win, big upset.
Yes, Army came in as something like a 15-point underdog, and the line actually opened at Army plus 22. So,
wow.
So whatever. Yeah, my personal. If I was setting the line, I would have set it at Army plus 12. So I think maybe people underestimated the team, but nevertheless, to go from being at least a 12-point underdog to winning by 15 on the road in Philadelphia was probably the best win that Army's had at least since 2010, I'm sure, and maybe since 1997. So,
for those that aren't familiar, if you're a college football fan, surely you are, but Army runs a little bit of a different system. They run the triple option is what they run, isn't it?
That's correct. So there's three aspects, and the quarterback, Coach Jeff Monken, the new head coach at Army, he's in his third season. He has said that he describes his quarterbacks as the point guards of the team. He wants them distributing the ball.
I think that's a great description. Yeah.
Yeah. So those guys have to understand what they're seeing at a high rate of speed and make decisions. So last night, well, we'll talk about quarterback Ahmad Bradshaw in a minute, but last night was probably his best game. And, what he did was he's a very good, very athletic runner. He's a converted running back, and what we saw last season was that he was very good running between the tackles. And the guy's he's just a big, burly, strong guy, and he's got wheels. He's got 4 or 5 speed. But last night was to distribute the ball. So with the triple option, your first option is to hand to the fullback for the fullback dive, and then your second option is for the quarterback to keep the ball. So they go to a mesh point like you would see with the read option, which is common now, except the quarterback would then keep the ball. And then his third option is, as he sprints outside to either run off guard or off tackle, he could also pitch the ball to a running back to the outside. So for the triple option, the bread and butter is the fullback dive that fixes the defense in place and then gives the quarterback the option to either, take one on what you might think of as a shallow penetration or to pitch outside for an envelopment and a long play. And that's what we saw last night. Army got, despite the fact that Temple is an excellent running defense, they ran right at the teeth of that defense with the fullback dive, getting between 4 and even 7 or 10 yards with the fullback dive. And then when they pitched outside, they were getting real yardage. Slot back Jordan Asbury had a big night, but they had 6 running backs carry the ball. And that was exceptional.
Yeah. How big was it for Army to get this big win? Aren't they coming off like a 2-10 season, something like that?
Yeah, we went 2-10 last season. I don't want to. I hesitate to say negative things about people who've been involved in the program because as a veteran of Army sports myself, it's not easy. There's no aspect of being an athlete at Army that's easy. Sometimes just getting out and fielding a team.
That's kind of what separates them a little bit from college athletics in general because it's not, I don't want to get too much into this, but it's not a football mill.
Yeah, right, exactly. When I made the decision to go swim at Army, I realized that I was putting my swimming career on the back burner, which doesn't mean that I didn't have a good career. It just means that I was making a decision to do something else afterwards. And I don't know how many big-time college programs are going to go in and say to a recruit, football's not the here. I mean, is Nick Saban going to say that to one of his football recruits? I don't think.
Well, never, no.
So, right. So yeah, Army. Okay, so Rick Ellerson was the coach before Jeff Monken, and I think he was a good coach. I think he got good production out of the players that he had, but he didn't recruit very successfully. And we saw that, I guess it was in 2013 with the Navy just blew Army off the field. I mean, the Army players that Ellerson fielded. Oh, yes. Yeah. And the Army players that Ellerson fielded, they weren't even as big as some of the kids you'd see in a Florida 4A high school game. I mean, they were just they were small. even by academy standards, they were small. And so, college football is about a lot of things, but it's really about recruiting. And the one thing that Monken has done very well is to bring in talent, to get people to buy into the idea that Army is a place to come and to be an athlete. You can be an athlete in Army. You just have to be more. So that's where we were. So now in his third season, he's got something like 79 sophomores, 79 yearlings, we call them at the academy. He's got another 59 plebes, and he's got, maybe a double handful of upperclassmen. And some of those upperclassmen are excellent.
It's a young
they're very good players. What's that?
Right. It's a young team.
Yes, right, exactly. So, he's to have 79 sophomores, and that be the backbone of your team, and to beat Temple on the road by 15 points, I don't know how many colleges.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. It sounded like Temple was having trouble executing their offense. Did they, kind of shoot themselves in, so to speak, or is Army's defense just, better than anticipated?
Both. Jihad Thomas ran for something like 1,200 yards last season, and he was out yesterday with a hand injury, and losing him, that didn't help. On the other hand, they've got a senior quarterback and a stable of running backs, some good tight ends. They can make excuses, but I wouldn't. Why would you, they have a good team. Temple is a running first team, and Army is a team that's built to stop the run. The best players are linebackers. Our two senior captains, Andrew King and Jeremy Tempf, are both inside linebackers. So you've got the two best players on the team right there in the middle to stop the run. So that put a lot of pressure, forced quarterback P.J. Walker to have to throw the ball, I think, a little more than he wanted to. And they had mixed success. They completed a long pass to a tight end. They had an interception that essentially went through the receiver's hands in the end zone. But then towards the end of the game, when it got down to crunch time and they really had to start throwing the ball, you could see that the pressure was more than they were prepared to handle at that time. It looked like they came unglued a little under the pressure. And you can imagine that coming into a game against a 2-10 Army team, they weren't expecting to wind up in a dogfight. So there you go.
It reminds me, in a sense, of course, I lived in Tennessee and went to school at the University of Tennessee, and the Vols played on Thursday night, and they were in a dogfight themselves. And fortunately, they were able to pull it out. And it reminds me of that. I don't want to say critical, but I've certainly questioned some of the things that Butch Jones has done. He's a fantastic recruiter, there's no doubt, but that team did not look prepared to play Appy State. And, they were able to pull out that win primarily really due to Appalachian State's mistakes more than their own play. And it's interesting when you see teams like that. Teams are expected to win, come in and struggle so greatly.
Yeah. Well, first off, let me say I broke 2 generations, something like 50 years of tradition at the at the University of Tennessee to go to West Point. My grandfather and both of my parents went to Tennessee, so I've been to more than my share of games there in Knoxville.
So you're the black sheep of the family.
Yeah, I really am. And my father was also a so we had some pointed conversations, believe it or not. I saw that.
Does he pull for Tennessee, and how does he feel about it?
First off, my father passed away in 2007.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. He did what he was doing. But thank you. He was a big fan of Army. He was not a big fan of the Naval Academy. I will say that. And he, when he was the G3 of 3rd Marine Division, he used to tell me that he'd meet West Pointers newly commissioned and how impressed he was with them. So, that's good.
Okay.
But football, he was diehard. I mean, he had season tickets. He had a box. Forget it. He was all in.
Yeah, it's football in Tennessee is generational. And, did you get the season tickets? What happened with the season tickets? Because those are big things. I mean, you can fight over them.
I didn't. I mean, I live in
okay.
So I guess I could have sold
really
them on the secondary market, but it didn't occur to me to do that. I would have given them back.
Yeah. Yeah. So since you mentioned it, it's a big deal. I want to ask you about Army Navy and that tradition. It's always such a big game, and it's so important to college football. Can you tell us a little bit about the history and why it has become so important?
Well, I don't know that I'm an expert on the specific rivalry, but obviously they're both two of the oldest programs in the country. I think Navy started their team a year early in like 1895. Army started in 1896, and the first Army-Navy game was within a year or two of this. And, they pretty much played every year with rare exceptions ever since. So you get 100-plus years into a rivalry and with services and pride on the line. And yeah, it gets pretty serious. I think it's hard for me to be objective about what other people think about the rivalry. Every time I watch the coverage on TV, and all these guys, we got a bunch of great Americans here. And it's true, they are great Americans, but for me, it's a football game. For me, it's a college football game about, football players who want to play well for their school, the school that, that I'm a part of. There's only 52,000 West Point graduates alive. There's only ever been 75,000 graduates in the history of the academy. So it's not a very large community. And I think it's both academies are pretty close-knit in their graduate networks, and that wins a lot, the fact that everybody cares deeply about the rivalry.
Yeah.
So.
Well, college football is about tradition and rivalry and pageantry. Anytime the NCAA, and they're a bumbling organization. I mean, anytime they try to make changes there, it just always rankles me a little bit, because that is one of the great things, if not the greatest thing about college football is that the history and what that history means to college football fans. I was looking at Army's schedule, and wow, they've got kind of a tough schedule. They have Rice in the next game, UTEP, Buffalo, and then Duke. Well, Coach David Cutcliffe doing a really fantastic job at Duke. That's going to be a tough game.
Duke is a common opponent for Army. We've played them a lot without a lot of success in recent years. Of course, the whole program hasn't had a lot of success, so I don't know what that says. But last year in particular, Bradshaw came. He had a turf toe that he was dealing with. He came into the game, and Duke run blitzed the triple option internet and just shut it down. And they must have run blitzed on 75% of snaps, and they just crushed Army's triple option with that. I think that the team is better for a variety of reasons. For one thing, last night we saw that the quarterback's operating out of the shotgun quite a bit, which is a thing that Army has not done, hasn't felt like it had the talent to do in recent years. So, little things. This is why having 79 plebes is difficult, but, having 79 yearlings is a little easier, right? You can just build institutional knowledge. You can get guys to do things that in other college football programs you would take for granted. Even with that, we had a block last night and 2 missed field goals. So I think that this is a young team that still has quite a bit to grow. But yeah, that Duke game is tough. And playing UTEP on the road in a high-altitude game, that's also not necessarily going to be easy. We've played Buffalo a few times in the last few years, and those games have come down to the wire more often than not. So, 3 road games coming off, Rice, and then this road game. The early part of the schedule is difficult, no doubt about it.
Yeah, after Duke, they have Lafayette, North Texas, Wake Forest, Air Force, Notre Dame, Michigan State, and Navy. I mean, that is like a gauntlet of tough games. Army's a little bit different, but what are the expectations in terms of their football program and this season in particular?
Well, I don't know what the expectations are inside the program. If I'm Coach Monken, I'm probably not trying to set the over-under, and I'm probably trying to tell my team to take it one game. For fans, I think the over-under is probably 5.5, and based on the fact that we won a game that nobody thought, right now you probably would like to see at least a 6-win season. I think that's entirely reasonable. After we finish the 3 road games, UTEP and Buffalo and Duke, then you come back for some winnable games at home, and that's good. but we haven't beat Air Force in a long time. We definitely haven't beaten Notre Dame in a long time. So yeah, there's some challenges, but I think that this is a team that can win 6 games anyway. I think that they can do that.
If they make a bowl, that's definitely a season, right?
Yeah. I mean, coming off a 2-10 season,
When
right
was
now
the last time they made a bowl game?
2010. They went, I think, 10-2, and won. I don't remember which bowl they won, and I don't remember who they beat. I apologize for that, but
that's all right.
the last time was in 2010.
Very interesting.
If you're talking about a small recruiting pool, right? Because you have to recruit students. They're recruiting legitimate student athletes, and that's true of Air Force and Navy as well. But it's also true of places like Wake Forest and all the Ivy League. So
Harvard.
There's a high demand for people who can pass their classes. Calculus is a mandatory class at West Point. You have to take 5 engineering courses. I don't know how many college football players are taking calculus, but everybody at all 3 service academies does.
I would say very, very, very few.
But there are schools where it's required.
Right.
Stanford, Stanford fields a decent team. I mean, I would say that they're doing okay, and they got some smart kids. So this is why Army's success this year is important, because what we saw last year was potential unrealized. Yeah. If they start to realize that potential and show future recruits that Army is a place where you can come and play ball for real, then, it just opens up possibilities.
Bradshaw, what other players for Army should fans be looking at and thinking about?
Well, while we're talking about the quarterback, Army is actually running a 2-quarterback system. Up until last night, I would have said that Chris Carter, who is a yearling this year, was actually the better quarterback with the ball in his. In other words, Bradshaw is probably a little faster. He's probably a little tougher, particularly running between the tackles. But Chris Carter, the other quarterback, is the better thrower. And at least late in the season last year, he was better running the offense and, pitching the ball. And like I said, playing that offensive point guard position. Last night, the most interesting thing about the game to me wasn't defense, although the defense played very well. It was the fact that here's a guy in Bradshaw who we have not seen really in command of the offense, and he took command, and he really ran it very efficiently. For a guy whose specialty has previously been to just bowl through the line, he probably carried 6 times left. He scored once, but most of the yardage was made in the middle or on the outsides with him, managing the offense. So then a second player to watch is Chris Carter, to wonder, how do they work him in? Because probably the best offensive player on the team is wide receiver Edgar Poe. And, if you're a triple option and your best player is arguably a wide receiver, okay, you got to get him the ball. And to get him the ball, I need my better throwing quarterback. So, it's a legitimate 2-quarterback system, and they both have different strengths. So I think it's interesting. That's something to definitely watch, is to see how do they manage this 2-quarterback system, because it's not one of these things where these guys are competitive and they are competitive, but it's not like they dislike each other. They bring different skill sets that I think will match up differently for different teams. So how do we bring in Chris Carter? How do we work Edgar Poe? I think Poe had 1 catch last night. How do we work a guy like that who's really an honest-to-God downfield threat into the offense? On the defensive side of the ball, let me mention one more guy. Slot back Jordan Asbury, he had a big night last night. Fullback, I think his first name is Darnell Wolfhook. He had a big night last night. A guy, I met his parents at the summer scrimmage last year. Rick Kurz is a sophomore tackle. He had a very big game last night. I know we don't talk about offensive linemen, but he's excellent.
We talk about him here. We have a lot of love for the big guys.
Yeah. So that's, if you just want to talk about reasons why they get pushed, it's because they've got young talent, and Rick Kurz is a good guy who's got a lot of talent. On the defensive side of the ball, I mentioned our captains, Jeremy Tempf and Andrew King. Let's see. The outside linebackers played very well last night. Alex Ackerman, I think he's a firstie or senior, and he had his best game that I think I've ever seen him have as a Black Knight. On the other side, on the outside, is Kenneth Brenson. He was very highly recruited last year, actually declined Stanford to go to West Point. He had an interception. I don't know if he got a sack, but he had a couple of tackles. And then the entire secondary, last year the secondary was a work in progress. This year they look good. Xavier Moss is a safety. He's a converted wide receiver. For the first half of the season, he looked lost. And I don't blame him. You're switching positions, trying to help your team, but especially against UConn and Wake Forest, he needed another couple of months to be ready for the season. His partner back there is Ryan England. England was probably the most improved player on the team last season. They've got cornerback Brandon Jackson, who is probably one of the better young defenders. So whoever it is on the cornerback side that starts opposite Jackson is going to have a lot of work. And indeed, I think Marcus Hyatt started last night. He got thrown at quite a bit, and there were a few completions that they made on that side. So that answer your question? Did I give enough people to watch?
Yeah, no, that was great. The schedule's interesting with the big win, and I always enjoy watching Army. I'm going to make an effort this season to watch them a little bit more, and I hope that you'll come back and tell everybody out there where they can find you on social media and where they can find your work, your writing about Army.
Well, I'm at Dan_T_head on Twitter, and my blog is danos-layer at blogspot.com. I'm not famous. I'm just a guy who likes to write, and I write about Army because I write about my life, and that's part of my life.
Well, it was such a pleasure to have you, and I hope that you'll come back. And I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it too.
And give a shout out to your wife, because I love to, and I love that she's encouraged you to do this.
Yeah, she's. I have a beautiful and very supportive wife named Sally Head, and she is amazing.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, and I hope that you'll come back soon.
Awesome. I will. Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, up next, Katie Flowers. We're going to get you guys your fantasy football fix. We'll talk about the big trade, the Sam Bradford stays. He's making that money. We should all be doing so well. So stay tuned. You are listening to Back Talk with Sharona.